Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Relationshiptopia. This is your girl co-host, Dr. Trell Ravenel. I have my co-host, Jill Speaks Truth, with me, and we are excited for another episode. We are still in the series, Don't Get Married If... for a number of reasons. And just for clarity, is not don't get married, but don't get married if you don't get married yet if you have these things happening. So we've been talking about the attachment styles, and so far we've gone over through two of the insecure attachment styles. We went over anxious attachment style, avoidant attachment style, and tonight or today, depending on when you're listening, we're going to go over the disorganized or the fearful or ambivalent attachment style. And then next week, we're going to finish up and talk about the goal of attachments, the style we all want to achieve, or at least be closer to that. So last time we talked a lot about different things and we share just different terms and things of that nature. So we don't want, everyone to be in the dark when we're spitting out terms and things of that nature. We know the normal person probably will not relate to many of the terms that we shared unless you're in some form of psychology or just have read up on this stuff or been in counseling yourself and things of that nature. So I wanted to take just a few minutes here and to give you some language and definitions on some of the terms, and then relate that to tonight in particular, the disorganized attachment. And then Jill and I will be ping ponging back. We want you to also, if you've been enjoying this series, go ahead and let us know. You can put it in the comments in the show as you're watching. You can shoot over an email. I think our email is somewhere in the, I hope it's somewhere in the show notes. You can try to get in touch with us. We'll make sure we have that information there, because we do want to know if you are enjoying these episodes, if you're finding value, and what else you want us to talk about. There are a lot of things we can talk about. So, it's all things relationships. So relationship with God, relationship with yourself, very important, and relationship with others. These podcasts and these conversations are all centered on helping you to have healthier, thriving, successful relationships. Okay. So we want to make sure that we are serving the needs. So on last week, I started talking about hypoactive and things of that nature. And you probably were like, what is that? What is she talking about? It's kind of like how it sounds, right? So when we understand hyper activity and hypoactivity, in particular, I was talking about its relation to the autonomic nervous system. And two of the nervous systems that I talked about last week was the parasympathetic nervous system and then the sympathetic nervous system. And I was talking about fight, flight, and all the things. So just a little understanding of what hyperactivity is and hypoactivity. So when you look at someone that's in a hyper state, is exactly what it sounds like. It's a state characterized by excessive movement, excessive energy, very impulse, and they have an inability to focus or calm down. And so when we look at the nervous system relation to hyperactivity, it's often linked to an overactive sympathetic nervous system, which prepares the body for fight and flight responses. So this state can definitely lead to heightened arousal. It can lead to anxiety. We talked about avoidant, but it also the anxiety attachment style. You'll see this with individuals that do have challenges still in that area with anxiety attachment as it pertains to relationship, depending on what's happening when there are triggers and things of that nature. And these individuals normally have a very difficult time in regulating their emotions being at a homostasis, I don't know if I'm saying that word right, state. So being at a regulate, go ahead, Jill.
I think it's homostasis.
Yeah, that state. So just being at a regulated state, being at a calm and just at a standstill. But when we look at hypoactive, this is characterized by low energy, lethargy. These individuals normally, if even in the attachment theory, when we look at avoidant or anxious or even disorganized, what we'll look at tonight, when they're triggered or things are happening, these individuals normally withdraw from the conversations, withdraw from the environment, withdraw from the person, and they have reduced responses to stimuli. So as it pertains to the nervous system relation, hypoactivity in the hypo state is associated with an overactive parasympathetic nervous system, which is the exact opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. In the parasympathetic nervous system, it leads to freeze. freeze, right? Literally, you can literal just freeze and be still, or you can freeze as it pertains to just withdrawing and wanting to be alone. And this does manifest as emotional numbness, disengagement from the environment, again, disengagement from the individual that may be contributing to feelings of nervousness, because what your nervous system is trying to do is trying to regulate. So a lot of things are happening at that time, and just depending on where you are on the spectrum, and how how the events, or the conversation or the activity is triggering you, your body's trying to get back into a safe space. So both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system is a part of, again, the autonomic nervous system, which is ANS, which regulates the body. Right, it regulates your blood pressure, it regulates your breathing without a conscious effort. And when you're in that hyper state, you may can tell when you're either state hyper or hypo, because there are things that are happening. Sometimes you have physical symptoms, especially in the hyper state. You have physical, well, both states, I shouldn't say especially. In any state, you have physical symptoms. You may feel numbness in your hands. You may feel like you're sweating. You may be sweating. Your heart is probably pounding. You're having heart palpitations. A lot of times people will say they're having an anxiety attack. You may hear someone saying they're having a panic attack. You can get headaches. Your parts of your body can start twitching. You can start getting twitching, not just in your eyes, which most of us are used to getting like twitching in our eyes, but you can get twitching, in parts of your forehead and things of that nature. So there are a lot of things that are happening in your body just to try to find some type of safety mode, right? So the sympathetic, again, that activates the fight or flight. So you're saying, okay, I'm going to either fight or flight, literal fight, or just figuratively fighting my way through, right? Or you're going to leave the situation entirely. So again, anytime your body feels like it's being stressed out, especially if you're dealing with any one of these insecure attachment styles, you're going to experience some level of physical symptom. Blood pressure can even go up. Your energy supplies go up. I remember, Joe, one time I was in a hyper state and my blood pressure went up to almost 200 over something. And, that's super high. My blood pressure is normally like once between 110 and 120 over the low 70s. And when I knew something was going on because my body was just feeling weird. And anytime my body is not feeling right, I'm checking my blood pressure, I'm checking my blood sugar levels. And I do that because I often fast and withdraw from food. So I do attempt to check my blood pressure and my my blood glucose anytime I'm fasting in a complete water state. And when I saw how high it was, I got even more nervous, right? Because I'm like, oh my God, something's going to happen. High blood pressure is associated to all types of stuff, and it kept going up. And I ended up going to the hospital. It was a whole thing. My husband kept saying, don't go to the hospital, just calm down, and to go down or whatever. I don't know what was happening. I don't know why I was triggered, why I even started feeling the way I started feeling for my blood pressure to go up. But I was aware in that moment. But I'm saying all that to say, when you're already in that anxious state, and we're talking about in the relationship space, and dealing with the attachment styles, if you're already in an anxious state, other things are going to continue to happen in your body until your body calms itself down. And again, the parasympathetic functions, it governs the rest and the digest. So this is a freeze. So tonight we're going to look at the disorganized, insecure, and I'm going to bring this all together as it pertains to how these nervous systems, and how the hypo and the hyper and all that stuff, how does that relate to the disorganized attachment. So when you look at disorganized or fearful or ambivalent is just you mix between two. You can't make up your mind. You're going back and forth. You want love, you don't want love. You want closeness, you don't want closeness. You want security, you don't want security. You're just trying to regulate between the two, right? So individuals that experience the disorganized, they're going to exhibit these mixed emotions, if you would, mix up anxious and avoidant. So if you haven't listened to the anxious or avoidant attachment style series, please go back and listen to that so you can bring all this together and see how the disorganized is basically covering both of these attachment style. So we already know that these attachment styles, the insecure ones, do result as a do manifest as a result of a break in care, which is a result of trauma that you experienced, or inconsistent caregiving. We don't like to say trauma sometimes. Let's just say inconsistent caregiving. And again, we've already determined it's not necessarily anyone's fault. We're not blaming our parents and things of that nature. And we're not saying that it was intentional as to why there was some sort of break in care or inconsistent caregiving. But we now have an opportunity to work on the healing portion of our relationships as a result of, what we may or may not have experienced in our childhood. So when we look at the relation to both states, the attachment disorder can lead to unpredictability and your emotional responses. Again, so we're going to look at that hyper or hack or hypo, where individuals may alternate between those states and they struggle with their emotional landscape. So the impact of attachment on the emotions, when we look at the hyper, these individuals again are going to have a very anxious. They may struggle with emotional regulation, leading to hyper responses when they feel threatened or insecure, and that's very important to note, because it's not necessarily you're physically feeling threatened, or there's a physical threat. But notice it says when you feel, when you feel like there's a threat, when you feel unsafe, when you feel psychologically unsafe, emotionally unsafe, and physically unsafe because of some type of trigger, and an individual's inability to self-soothe. So if you're not able to self-soothe, it causes you to resort to an impulsive action and seeking constant reassurance and perpetuating anxiety, seeking constant love, constant acceptance, constant feeling of wanting to belong in that relationship, whether that's a romantic relationship with friends and family members and things of that nature. So you even might find yourself doing things that are outside of your norm and having maladaptive personality and maladaptive behaviors being displayed because you need that reassurance, you need that love, you need that support. So you're going to act out as a result of that. When we look at the
But Trell,
hypo, go
oh,
ahead.
when you finish that statement, I want to jump in because I want to comment on some of the things you've said so far. Is now?
Okay. No, let me finish. Let
Go
me
ahead, finish it.
go over hypo. So when you look at hypoactive and the insecure attachment as it relates to disorganized attachment, these individuals again, they're going to withdraw, because that is the defense mechanism. John Gottman talks about stonewalling. That's the same thing as withdrawing. You withdraw yourself from the conversation. You withdraw yourself from the presence of the individual or the environment that you're perceiving that's causing a threat, because you're going to try to defend against any form of rejection or any vulnerability, anything that's going to lead to you feeling emotionally numb. You're going to withdraw yourself in. That's a form of a safety mechanism, if you would. Not necessarily the healthiest, because we still have to deal with these issues and still have to confront the overall problem. But this is a form of just trying to self protect. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, Jill, and then I can go into some characteristics and relations of both states when you're done.
Okay, so I have a couple of things I want to share. One is I think it's so important for us to recognize one in the whole, even as you're going through this, I know it's a lot of information. The goal is that you see if you can identify your attachment style. Hopefully, well, you may be able to identify if you're insecure. If these things are showing up for you, that means that you may be on the insecure spectrum. And it's believed that over 50% of the population is on the insecure spectrum versus 50% on the secure spectrum. And Trail, just to reiterate, you said, yeah, it's not that your parents did something wrong. And even I believe you stated, like, you have to understand it also can be a perceived break in care, right? So it doesn't even have to be real. And I believe you mentioned that. And lastly, what I wanted
Hmm.
to say is really, I think we underestimate how much in relationships that our nervous system is responding and being regulated, co-regulated, or the lack thereof. And what is known is, um, and you get to listen to your nervous system and see what it's saying, because if you feel uneasy, and that uneasiness usually shows up in the form of avoiding, wanting to avoid the person or your partner, or anxious, maybe constantly wanting to go towards that person when they're not reciprocating, then you need to pay attention to your nervous system. And that's a signal that you feel unsafe. A lot of times, especially from the female and the feminine perspective, we want to feel safe, we want to feel protected, but for so long we have ignored or underestimated the importance of emotional safety. And that's what needs to be established to help you to get out of that. And if that person, your partner, can't help establish that emotional safety for you, then you get to make a decision that you will create that emotional safety for yourself and deciding what that will look like. And
Okay.
so, as we talked about, it's so interesting that the anxious and avoidance tend to trigger each other. But now, as we're talking about the disorganized attachment styles, we're getting into that. We're going to see a combination of those behaviors just kind of ping pong, and you're kind of not consistent. You're kind of up and down with it, but still not that even kill secure base. So I just kind of want to
Absolutely.
reiterate how much it really does show up in relationships. And let me also say this: it's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with, and we do encourage each other within partnerships too. You should be kind of helping your partner regulate. And again, I'm like, if you're not willing to do that, then you really need to evaluate whether you're really cut out for relationships, because that's part of it. You should care how they feel and want to try to soothe their uneasiness, create that space for emotional safety. But that's where we're going to get to as we move to the secure attachment. That'll make it easier for you to do that as you understand that this is not a competition and they're not a scarcity of resources, that there is enough resources, whether that's time, attention, and energy, to go around and be to co-regulate with your partner.
Absolutely. That's good, Joe. And I wanted to add to, we were talking about, how these things can develop, you know, um, in some ethnic groups, in particularly African American, Black American homes. I'm not saying other homes don't. I'm just relating to my race and ethnic group. There's a lot of yelling that goes on in the household, right? There's a lot of stress and pressure. You often have households, unfortunately, that are single parent households, or you may have two parent in the home and you have one parent that is not all the way checked in, if you would. So that does leave the stress on the other parent. Sometimes it leaves us just the stress of taking care, even financially, because one parent may be dealing with addictions or just other things. And I know this happens in a lot of households, not just Black, African American, or our ethnic group, but I'm just speaking right now from that category or population of people. So, when you grow up in a house and there's a lot of yelling, and there's some punishment, and you're always being punished for something, punished for, getting a bad grade, punished for, talking too much in school. And a lot of that comes from, again, the parents that are overstressed. So they try their best to deal with the situations that are happening with the children, and sometimes not making the most effective decisions. And that does, that can later on impact the child, even when a child is seeking some level of comfort. If a parent is ignoring them and they're seeking comfort, again, because parent may just be overwhelmed themselves, say parent is stressed out, and things of that nature. So they may not always have the capacity, the energy, or the emotional wellness to be able to connect and to help their children self-soothe. So you see that a lot in younger children with parents, because parents don't know how to self-soothe themselves, so they're unable to do that for their children. So so this disorganizes, ambivalent, going back and forth, wanting, both love and not love, and support and not support, and just going back and forth between the anxious and avoidant. These things that I just mentioned can also contribute to a child being in that disorganized state, and of course, then growing up and being in that adulthood state. So, just a little bit on how it does show up in the childhood relationship, or the child relationship, or in children. So, children normally that deal with the disorganized, they will normally break things, break toys, and they behave in a very volatile way, and they have a very difficult relationship with caregivers. They may appear to be very disrespectful, or very uneasy, or just intolerant, and things of that nature. And they get classified as that. And I believe even when that happens, Joe, when they get classified, although the child is really not bad, or just not an angry child, they may have emotional dysregulation. But because most parents are not educated to understand what's going on with the child. Is okay, Johnny is breaking the toy because Johnny feels ignored, right? Johnny is breaking the toy because he's already always being yelled at. This is his expression, and a 5-year-old can definitely cannot express himself in the same way a 10-year-old. A 1-year-old or 3-year-old definitely cannot express themselves in the same way as a 7-year-old. So it's really great for parents and guardians and overseers to have an understanding of these things. So, I said last time that this is not, even if you don't fall into any of these categories, your kids don't fall into any of these categories, that is great. However, I know you know someone that does. And although the information may not be directly for you, it's indirectly for you. And we all know somebody that can make use of this information and be able to begin to reflect on their life, their decisions, and use this information to get in a healthier place as it pertains to relationships. So that's how it shows up in childhood. Joe, you wanted to add anything to that or go on to the adulthood, how it plays out in adulthood?
No, I don't really want to add anything to that. I think you kind of covered it. So moving on to adulthood, um, it's gonna kind of mirror. So what we see as a child will respond. Sometimes they're more avoidant, sometimes they're more anxious. Even in relationships, you're gonna see that exact paradigm in relationships. Sometimes disorganized individual will show up more anxious, meaning coming close, maybe even being happy about getting close, even when their partner isn't reciprocating. And then other times, as mentioned, they're going to be more on the avoidant side, meaning, avoiding conversation. You use the word stonewalling, right? And that could be just withholding speech, not talking, creating physical distance, tending to turn out rather than turn in, meaning rather than turning in and having that communication with the partner, they're turning out to other individuals, having conversations, talking about the relationships, talking about the relationship with other people, but not talking to the person in the relationship. It's kind of crazy how that works, and so you'll see this like a combination. Um, Sometimes when their partner wants to get close, they fear intimacy, so they may pull away, and so you'll see kind of like this unbalance. It seems like they can't, ideally in the relationship, you want it to kind of be almost like a little dance, and you're kind of flowing, and you know what I mean, have like
Like
this
salsa.
natural flow of thing. Yeah, you know what I mean. But you won't see that. They may tend to date a lot of people because they don't want to get close. So we're seeing like this fear of intimacy, fear of enmeshment, fear of closeness, which that's kind of on the avoiding side that shows up. Tend to attract, I'm gonna say, abusive relationships and partners. But let me say what is abusive, or even I like to use the word toxic, which they're not the same, but they have some relation. So when you talk about abusive, a lot of times you may be talking about somebody that may be very aggressive or hostile, maybe verbally using very strong language, maybe condescending, um, maybe even physical. Now, toxic, you may not have those type of paradigms. However, toxic shows up in multiple ways. What are they I'm thinking about? Your partner can be toxic just because of the lack of skills. So you could be attracting a partner that lacks skills of empathy, lacks skills of being able to just be supportive, maybe being more dismissive, being more defensive. These things are not effective and healthy in relationships. And so you will see these. One way that Lewis Howell describes a toxic relationship is saying that you experience a toxic relationship when one of the three of these things are missing: love, trust, and respect. So if you have two of the three, or one of the three, you're in a toxic relationship. If one of those three things are missing in a relationship, it's not going to be healthy, because there has to be a mutual trust, there has to be a mutual respect, and there has to be a mutual love. If one of those things are missing, the relationship there's going to be a breakdown. If one partner don't respect the other person, then that's going to show up, and that doesn't feel good. If one person love and the other person don't, again, that's going to show up, and that's going to feel good. One thing that came to me recently, I'm like, in a relationship like that, the truth of the matter is, if you're in a relationship and one person isn't happy, let me tell you something: neither partners are going to ultimately be happy. And I will even argue neither partners are happy, not happy with that relationship. Right? Hear me and hear me well. It's hard for somebody to convince me now that if one person says, I want out of this relationship, and the other person says, I want to stay, it's hard to believe that either one of you guys want to be happy, because the person that don't want to be there is not going to show up and invest in you and treat you with the love, respect, honor, and all the things you need. And so you're going to feel, at a minimum, like I'm not going to say it's going to devalue you, but you just a feel away. You're not going to feel as good as you would with somebody who wants to be there and somebody who is pouring into you. So you may not be getting abused, but you could be getting neglected. And so these are the type of relationships, when you have a disorganized personality type, you're more likely to attract, and even worse, you're more likely to stay. And that's why, I'm so excited as we pivot next week to secure attachment, that once you get to that place when you're starting to move on off the disorganized spectrum or these insecure spectrums and move to the secure spectrum, one of the key cornerstones of that is being able to let go of these types of relationships. Even if you attract it, doesn't mean you have to entertain it. And knowing how to take a step back and be like, this relationship is not going to serve me, and either require that person to change their behavior and show up in a more mature, healthy way, or you get to detach yourself to connect with somebody that can. So those are some of the ways. I haven't even caught all of them because we still have a couple more to the doubt relationships. This is you'll see a desperation, seeming very pressed, a lack of contentment with being alone, and really just really eager to be in partnership, really eager to be in connection with somebody else. Sometimes a relationship can feel like a little bit of a war zone because there's so much back and forth and unbalanced. Like there's not this healthy flow of communication, healthy flow of shared emotions. And the last thing I'm going to share, Charlie may want to share a couple others, but what I want to say, in these type of relationships, a lot of times there's not a safe space, as I mentioned, to feel. And I believe it was Sarissa Hughey who says, permission to feel is permission to heal. And if you don't have permission to feel, meaning your feelings, your thoughts and feelings are not being valued and validated in that relationship, then that's going to create problems. And we're saying is someone with a disorganized type of way of being is more likely to attract and even more so stay in these type of dysfunctional relationships. And even I may go and say destructive. And so you guys know we are big advocates of marriage and big advocates of healthy relationships, but we also are big advocates of telling people, don't get married if you have a disorganized attachment style and you haven't taken the time to figure out what these healthy and unhealthy dynamics look like, and how even if you're predisposed or whatever, you may experience some of these symptoms or ways of being and then disorganized, that you get to show up and choose differently by the decisions you make as you navigate in relationships, and don't allow yourself to settle into something that's not serving you. And I can tell, like, I'm getting like super excited about this book project that I've been working on. If I can shameless plug right now, The Power of Letting Go. It's been a project I've been working on for some time. And it's just like so much in that is so relevant to the conversation of attachment style, because the fear of letting go, the fear of wanting to hold on and thinking that staying in something that's rocky, staying in something that's toxic, staying in something that's abusive is better than nothing at all, is the mindset shift that has to happen. So there has to be a shift in the mind to help you to get to the healing side of this attachment. I think that's all I'm going to share about it. I don't know, Trev, if you want to touch a few more points under the doubt, how that shows up in your doubt relationships, and how to kind of, go from there. Are you ready to move on? And I kind of already got into some of the overcoming and managing.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just move on. What I would say, one thing you mentioned about neglect, you were mentioning abuse, but I do want to say that neglecting your partner is a form of abuse. It is a form of emotionally abuse when you're neglecting, especially when you're intentionally neglecting your partner and neglecting their emotions. So I did want to just point that out. So if anybody's in that situation, you could begin to reflect on that and see how we can help you move through that. So managing.
Let me say real quick before you go, I have to say this 30 seconds. And with that, you can die from neglect. Just like a child can die, a baby infant, if they don't get what they need, they will die. That's the same with us. And it may not be overnight, and it may not even be a physical, but the word of God says hope deferred makes the heart sick. And all 90% of physical illnesses is manifest from emotional issues. So don't take it lightly. It's not an okay thing. It's problematic, and you get to make some better decisions to shift to not be that person and it's not be with that person. Okay, back to you, sis.
Yeah, I mean that's true because you just connected that to the hypoactive, because if you become constantly in a state of lethargic and feeling withdrawn and emotional numbness, that leads to what? Depression. That leads to chronic depression. That leads to so many things. Unhealthy eating, if you're eating at all at that point. So you're going to physically start doing things that's going to neglect yourself. You're not taking care of yourself anymore. You're not taking care of your mental health anymore. So that leads to so many things. It can lead to other mental illnesses and just a gamut of things. So you definitely want to pay close attention if this is happening in your life and others around you. So when we look at how to manage, remember, we don't want to really use the word overcome because we feel like you can be 85% better. These things will still show up. You may still have triggers and things of that nature, but it definitely will not have a significant impact on your life when you begin to notice them, be aware of them, and get the support that you need. So the first thing is that you're going to want to repattern or reprogram your brain, if you would. And that's basically a combination of therapeutic processes and approaches, self-awareness, as we always talk about, and just learning how to be more emotionally regulated, identifying your triggers, knowing what's causing them, what's creating them, and then knowing how to self-soothe. And I'll talk about self-soothing in just a little bit. The next thing under managing is building a strong foundation to exist. That's your own foundation, and that's the support environment around you. Again, if you're in an environment currently that is unsafe, that is toxic, that is psychologically unsafe, you're constantly going up and down, you're hypo, you're unable to get regulated at all, you may need to remove yourself from that environment for a period of time. Okay, people that are married, I'm not saying go get divorced and leave them or leave her. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that you perhaps need to remove yourself from that environment for a period of time. And if you have children, you definitely need to remove yourself from that environment a period of time. People they have the misconception that, oh, I have a misperception. Oh, we have children. I'm not going to leave, and take the children. Well, are the children being exposed to toxicity? Do you think that this is going to help the children, or do you think this is going to hurt long term? A lot of times decisions are being made, and long term it definitely works against you. So definitely use wisdom, get wise counsel, of course pray, and all the things, just to make sure that you're making the healthiest and the best decision. Third thing is to love and to be loved in return. Self love is the best love. Again, the relationship topia is all about relationship with God, relationship with yourself, then the relationship with others. So make sure your relationship with God is rock solid. He's always going to remind you of who you are he knew you, before you were created, before you even thought of in your mother's womb, before your parents even knew they would have you, before they start the conversations about having a child. God already knew you, and he wanted you to have an amazing life, a life full of love. Of course, there are going to be challenges, absolutely. However, the challenges does not have to be you living in a toxic state. The challenges do not have to be, you're constantly being abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, and all that stuff. And I know one scripture you might be thinking about, Romans 8 and 28, all things work together for my good. Absolutely, they do. However, however, they don't have to happen. Like, you don't have to be in an abusive relationship for God to get glory. Like, that's not true. You don't have to, go through these horrific things in life for God to get glory, to bring you on the other side of it. He already has all the glory that he needs and he desires. So, of course, that opportunity will, if you give him the opportunity to be glorified in that, absolutely. But these things do not have to happen to you in order for you to give God glory, if you would. I hear that a lot in, our religious circles. So I wanted to make that clear. The fourth one is building self-trust and trust in others. Again, just like self-love, build self-trust. Begin to trust yourself, trust your feelings, trust your thought patterns. Of course, if you're now in a healthier state, trust yourself when yourself is telling you you're not in a good place and you need to seek help. You need to seek support. Don't look at everybody as as the person that may have contributed to the trauma, i.e. your parent or even a past relationship and things of that nature. Start doing little things to start trusting other people. Start small. A return phone call, meeting you for dinner or something like that. Somebody being able to show up. You may have this fear of rejection, of course, because dealing with this disorganized, that the person is not going to show up. They're not going to call you back. They're going to treat you like the other person treated you and things of that nature. Try not to automatically go into that mode and go into that nervous energy and things of that nature. Think the best of the person. Give the individual a chance and be able to look at them through a different lens and not the lens as the other people that may have hurt you in the past. And then the last one is just identify and establish healthy boundaries. You get to decide what that's going to look like as it pertains to relationship, the one that you're in now or one that you may get into. And again, the relationship boundary should be where you begin and the other person ends, or when you end and the other person begins. There should be a clear line of demarcation of things you will accept, things I don't want to say tolerate now, so I'm just want to say things that you will accept, things that are okay, things that create safety environments for you. Jill said earlier about your partner respecting and validating your emotions and things of that nature, not just dismissing you and throwing you away and saying things like you're too needy and all this other negative stuff. No, in a relationship, I should be needy. I should need you, and you should need me to some degree. That's why we are in partnership with one another. Partnership, the first part of that is part. Everybody has a part to play. Everybody has responsibility in this relationship, and it's just not for sex, especially for the marital individuals. It's just not for us to take pictures and post them on social media. It's not just for us to travel and have a great time and let everybody know that we have an amazing relationship and hashtag relationship goals. It's so much more than that comes with the relationship. It's a lot of work that's involved as you're growing, as you're evolving, as things are coming up. I'm reading this book now. It's called The Myth, and it talks about illness and trauma and things of that nature. And it talks about this young lady that experienced like a gang rape when she was a young girl, and her mom, was a person that found her, and her mom said, don't tell anybody about this. This never happened. You're going to get through it. This will be our little secret. Don't you know that this trauma, the effect of this trauma did not show up in her until after 40 years or something. It was like she was
Wow.
53, 55,
Wow.
and it showed up in her body. It showed up in her responses and things of that nature. So I encourage you, if you've dealt with anything in your life, and some things you may not remember because like her, she suppressed this for that long and it came up later in life. But if you think that you may have experienced something in life, if you can go through some deep thought, but I would say do this in a professional space. Don't try to do this on your own, and try to remember or recall if there's something, especially if things are happening and there's no rhyme or reason for it. Even in relationship, there's no rhyme or reason as to why you perceive you may have grew up in a healthy environment, da 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 da, but you're responding in some of these ways that we have defined tonight or today and also previously. I would encourage you to definitely seek professional help to try to uncover some of these things, unpack some of these things, so you can finally be able to process these things. Because if not, it's going to show up because the body definitely keeps score. So with that said, here are a few self-soothing techniques I wanted to share really quickly, Jill. When I talk about self-soothing with this attachment style, again, you want to make sure you're regulating your emotions. So, I think we talked about before, mindfulness and meditation. And of course, as believers, followers of Christ, our methodology of mindfulness, if you would, and meditation is meditating on the word of God. So understanding what the word of God has to say about you, about your life, about your future, even about your past, right? All the things that are in your past, God has already forgiven you for them. Even if you may say it was my fault, or you may have been told, it happened because it was, you were the problem, it was your fault and things of that nature. So you want to be able to uh, know what the word of God has to say about that, so that would no longer be a part of your language. It would no longer be a part of your psyche. Some may, listen to soothing music. I particularly like to listen to music. Taking a warm bath. I know these are like practical things and simple things, but you'll be surprised, Joe, how many of us work so hard and do so many things. We don't have time to do this. One of my self-care methods, I was talking to my therapist, is taking a hot shower. And sometimes I stay in there for a long period of time. That helps calm me. It helps soothe me. Some gentle physical activity. You might be doing like walking or a light jog, things of that nature. And exercise also is very helpful to try to help self soothe. You just want to make sure that you're grounding, you have sensory grounding, right? And feeling like you are safe and feel like your foot is touching the ground, and you're just okay. Enjoying a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, even decaf, maybe if you're hypersensitive to caffeine, your favorite comfort food, not every day, but just enjoy yourself, being able to take it all in, creating those safe environments for yourself, not expecting other people to always do that for you, and just learning that emotional regulation that's really going to help you on this journey, in addition to getting the support you need from a professional counselor or a relationship coach, or even wise counsel from your local church. If you do have that available to you, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And you will be in a position where you're ready to get married at some point, or your current marriage can possibly recover, just depending on the situation.
Absolutely. And in closing, I would say the truth of the matter is education, knowledge, understanding, and applying all those things can really equip you for anything. So it's really about being aware. And this is where we're meeting you here at the level of awareness and knowledge. And then now you get to start applying this and start to see how these things are playing out in your life and how you choose to respond in those moments. So,
Absolutely. All right. So I know this is a little lengthy. It's a lot. Listen, it's a lot. And that's why I say most people, they don't have this information, because unless you are in that space or in that industry or have gone through some of these things yourself, this is not everyday conversations, right, Jill? So hopefully you do find some value in this. And we look forward to finishing off this series on next week, and just finishing up talking about the secure attachment. So until that time, see you later,
we're
alligators.
out. So until next
Bye.
time, peace and blessings. Bye bye.